The Detroit Red Wings have added Alex DeBrincat, so there's a lot of excitement in Detroit, but will it be enough to get them to a playoff spot this year? Brian Fisher of Locked On Red Wings joins us to talk about that and all things Red Wings next on the Locked On NHL Podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. And you can also now find us on SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just do a search for Locked On NHL. It is great to welcome back to the show Brian Fisher of Locked On Red Wings. An exciting time in Detroit right now, and a lot of it centers around the addition during the offseason of Alex DeBrincat. What exactly is he going to bring? I mean, I'm sure there's a ripple effect with DeBrincat's addition. What does he bring to the table for this team?
Well, the number one thing that he brings to the team is goals. On the Detroit Red Wings last year, Dylan Larkin led the team in points. He had 79 points in 80 games played, point per game player, but only player on the team hit 30 goals. After that, it was David Perron with 24 and 56 points. Dominic Kubalik, who we traded to the Senators for DeBrincat with 20 goals and 45 points. Like, there's very clearly a large gap between Dylan Larkin and the rest of the group of the Detroit Red Wings. And there's been a lot of roster turnover altogether. In this offseason, he addressed Steve Yzerman addressed a lot of goal scoring different ways, bringing in Daniel Sprong, hoping he's not a flash in the pan, and can bring us a 20-goal season yet again, as he did with Seattle last year. But Alex DeBrincat, number one, he addresses goals. This team, that was their, well, I want to say it was their biggest issue, but they had a lot of things going wrong with them last year, like goaltending and defensive core, but which was also addressed. But when Scotty and I talk about the biggest issues that needed to be addressed, like, you're not going to win hockey games unless you put the puck in the back of the net. And the Red Wings didn't do a whole lot of that last year. So if Alex DeBrincat, because last year was a down year for DeBrincat with the Ottawa Senators, I think he had 66 points, 27 goals after having like 41 goals with the Chicago Blackhawks the year before. 66 points would still comfortably put him second best on the team points. And we're hoping for even more of that. We're hoping that he bounces back and gets back to like Chicago Blackhawks style Alex DeBrincat. So to bring him in, Scotty and I talked about it. If you take this Red Wings team from last year and you add DeBrincat's 30 goals, then that takes them from a bottom 10 team goals for to a top 12 team in goals for. And I understand, obviously, you lost like DeBrincat, who, provided 20 goals. So you do the math there, but then you brought in other guys who hopefully can supplement that. The scoring goals is such a important thing. And that's like the number one thing that DeBrincat's gonna bring. And that's what you brought him in to do.
One of the keys, obviously, for DeBrincat's success is who he plays with, who are his line mates. And, you mentioned Dylan Larkin. Any early indications so far in training camp about the chemistry between these two?
Well, so Derek Lalonde on day one of training camp, obviously it's training camp, so they've shaking it up every single day here. But on day one, the line that Dylan Larkin was on was with Raymond and DeBrincat. Now, in the offseason, I was a little bit skeptical that Raymond and DeBrincat would play on the same line with Dylan Larkin because they're kind of, I won't say they're the same type of player, but they're both undersized for NHL standards, wingers. And DeBrincat plays above his size. Like, he plays bigger than he is, but that doesn't still make up for the fact that he's a little bit smaller. I think he's 5'9", maybe even 5'8" officially is what he's listed at. So, I was a little skeptical that they might get bullied and then it wouldn't provide a lot of great chemistry. But if you look at their pros as well, obviously DeBrincat being a huge goal scorer, he gets a fair amount of assists. Dylan Larkin can shoot and he can pass. And Lucas Raymond can do the same thing. So you think, like, when it comes to goal scoring ability and setup ability, that would be a great line. I was just skeptical because of their size. I know Derek Lalonde in a press conference said that he thought Raymond and Fabry had some phenomenal chemistry. And I was predicting that Raymond would end up on the second line. One, because he's still a growing player. Putting him on the second line still gives him quality minutes, but gives him a little bit more room to breathe and grow. And then also David Perron could bump up. I know he usually plays off wing like DeBrincat does on that left side. But you put him on the right side, he's that guy who can get into the corner like Tyler Bertuzzi did for the Detroit Red Wings and will now do with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's the guy who can get in the corner, dig that puck out, and set up his goal-scoring teammates in Larkin and DeBrincat. David Perron does the same thing, plus the added benefit of he is a shooter. David Perron can score. He's a power play wizard. So I really like the idea of Larkin, DeBrincat, and Perron. I'm not opposed to Larkin, DeBrincat, and Raymond either, if that's what's best for the team. But I think Larkin and DeBrincat is, I don't say set in stone because we haven't seen a game yet of them being played, but they're both top-line caliber players.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what the chemistry that develops between them is. You mentioned briefly Daniel Sprong. Talk to me about some of the other newcomers on this team.
Oh, I mean, we'd be here for half an hour if I talked about every single one of them. So yeah, Daniel Sprong had a great season last year with the Seattle Kraken. I believe he had 21 goals with them last year, despite playing third and fourth line minutes. He's going to come here with the opportunity of the Red Wings to try and get into a top 6 role, middle 6 probably. I don't see him playing fourth line, but that is a huge add for the Detroit Red Wings depth because last year, once you got outside the top 6, there wasn't much offense to be had. And you look at teams like the Vegas Golden Knights, and granted, they are star-studded too, but they didn't have a lot of, I think the top point getter was in the 60s as well. They were just a really deep team. All 4 lines contributed, and that's how you have success in the NHL is when you're 4 lines deep. So Daniel Sprong, if he's not a flash in the pan and he can provide, 20 goals again from the second or third line, that provides a ton of depth offense and scoring. And again, I talk about pressure. It takes pressure off the top 6 to do everything all the time. It makes every single line a threat and keeps other teams on notice that you can't just, okay, well, we're against the third line. So, you can take it a little bit easier. Well, this guy's a threat. He's going to be a threat to score. JT Compher, I'm not in love with the dollar amount that they gave him. I think 5x5 is a little much for JT Compher, but I understand free agency. That's what's going to happen. You're going to overpay for free agency every single time, but I love that he's a two-way forward. He's a special teams guy too. He had a career year last year, much like Andrew Kopp did last year or the year prior as well. The only difference is he's not coming off a core muscle surgery, so he should be able to get off the ground running coming into the new season. Andrew Kopp, it took him a little while to get used to things because he didn't have a training camp. He started his first time back on the ice was essentially game 1 of the NHL season last year, so he was sluggish to begin. So you have 2 guys in Andrew Kopp and JT Compher who can both play 2C. They're going to be battling it out for 2C all year long. They're going to have great chemistry. And then there's tons of other guys too. Christian Fischer, Klim Kostin are going to bring an edge that this team needs. Christian Fischer being a PK specialist, Klim Kostin being huge and intimidating. They need that on the forward core because they got bullied a lot last year because they didn't have any grit really. Defensively, Justin Hall, I think he's a little bit of a martyr, a little bit of a scapegoat in Toronto. He was awful in the playoffs. Won't make any excuses for that. Another player, I'm not really happy with the dollar amount they gave him. But again, I understand free agency. He'll play second pair, third pair minutes with the Detroit Red Wings. I think he'll do just fine. He's definitely an upgrade over everyone else. Gostisbehere brings that offensive punch on the blue line that they lost when they traded Hronek away. And plus, it's a 1-year deal. So if this team's out of it come the playoffs and he's having a good year, you flip him at the deadline for more assets. I really love I can't undersell how much I love the Gostisbehere acquisition. I just, trying to keep things timely here because the Red Wings made 10 acquisitions. Jeff Petrie on the right side. They traded for him for next to nothing. I love that veteran presence. He comes home and gives him something to play for, finish out his career with his hometown team. If you look at the advanced metrics, he's still a quality defenseman on the right side, despite the fact that he's 35. Obviously, we're going to expect a little bit of a dip in play, but he's not going to be getting top pair minutes like he used to either. So he should still be strong with less minutes. So I'm trying to think who else. James Reimer, Alex Lyon. That's still the biggest question mark with the Detroit Red Wings. The James Reimer James Reimer last season with the San Jose Sharks had a down year, but the San Jose Sharks were also abysmal last year. So if you look at James Reimer's career stats, every single season of his career, besides last year, he's had over a 900 save percentage. I think he bounces back to that and is a quality backup to Ville Husso, who I also think will bounce back now that he's not injured, got a year of being the number 1 guy under his belt, and has a quality backup behind him because there was a lot of pressure on him last year when Magnus Hellberg and Alex Nedeljkovic didn't pan out. So I think James Reimer bounces back. He might not be the way he used to be because he's 35 plus. But then Alex Lyon, if everything goes bad, you have Alex Lyon in the minors who can step up. No. That's the my quick version of everyone the Red Wings brought in.
So briefly, is that all of these new additions, is that going to be enough to get this team into the playoffs in a very competitive conference and division?
I don't know. To put it bluntly, Gil, I don't know. This is a incredibly deep division, and I hate it because of that. This team on paper is so much better than they were last year, but you look at teams that they're playing against, like the Ottawa Senators, who have a fantastic roster. I mean, I won't sell them short. Guys like Stutzla, Brady, Norris, Sanderson, they're just up and down their roster. They got so much talent. I think their head coaching is what's keeping them back. They keep running it back with DJ Smith. I don't know what the deal is with that, but they're poised to take a step forward every single year. They just have really failed to get that final leap into the playoffs. Buffalo Sabres proved to be really scary on offense and really abysmal on defense, missing the playoffs by 1 point. So they're very much in the conversation. Boston is going to not get 135 points, but I wouldn't be surprised if they get 100 again, because they still have Marchand, they still have Pasternak, they still have DeBrusque, they still have McAvoy. They have the best goalie tandem in the league in Swayman and Ullmark. Tampa Bay, still Tampa Bay. They're just another year older. Toronto is still Toronto. They're just another year older, and they brought in a lot of like gritty guys in the offseason. I mean, Florida is right there. It's just the only team I'm not really concerned about is Montreal, and I think in the next couple of years you will be concerned with them because they have a great prospect pool. So I hate to sound like a cop out, but I don't know. I could see this. I think this team is going to compete until the very end, but I don't think I can't tell you right here, right now, I can guarantee they make the playoffs. I think my minimum for success is they just barely miss the playoffs. That's my minimum for a success. My overwhelming success would you make the playoffs.
Right. All right, Brian, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they can find the podcast and where they can find you on social media?
Well, you can find Locked On Red Wings on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Odyssey, the Odyssey app. I got to plug that because I work for an Odyssey radio station. And you can also find me on Twitter at Brian Fisher WWJ. The team, the podcast account is at LO_Red Wings. And then my co-host is at Bentley Scotty.
All right, Brian, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including point spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. And hey, it's not just the NFL you could bet on. You've got the Major League Baseball playoffs right around the corner, and NHL futures are available right now. You can use your knowledge of the NHL at FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season and more. FanDuel, official partner of the National Football League.